Today's episode is sponsored by my friends at Ear Trumpet Labs. Ear Trumpet Labs make handcrafted microphones at their shop in Portland, Oregon. They are equally beautiful to look at and beautiful to listen to, and I'm always amazed at how good they look and how good they sound on stage at my shows. I recorded this entire episode on the Edwina model, and I'm proud to have Ear Trumpet Labs as a sponsor of Cowboy Crossroads. You can find out more about them at eartrumpetlabs.com. I'd like to start today's episode with a poem written by S. Omer Barker. Barker wrote a lot of very short poems that are a real pleasure to read and to recite. This one is entitled The Coyote. The coyote of the western ranges survives despite all modern changes. He views the world with dauntless drollery and does not practice birth controllery. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges, and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode, I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy west and beyond. My guest today is Too Slim. Too Slim is the bass player, humorist, vocalist, and sidekick with the classic cowboy band Riders in the Sky. In case you missed it, I interviewed Riders in the Sky back on episode 30. Slim was not able to join us for that interview, so I was pleased to be able to interview Slim back in the summer when I was opening for the Riders in Winston, Oregon at Riverbend Live. I sat down with Slim backstage in the women's restroom and recorded this interview. Here's Too Slim.
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, western Michigan, so I was always looking west, and I grew up on a little piece of land just west of town there, and we had horses and chickens and big gardens and orchards and stuff like that. My dad had a real farming itch that he had to scratch, and so that's where I grew up and listened to all kind of music. There was a kids TV show in town on WOOD Channel 8 with a guy named Buck Berry, who was the local singing cowboy, and a lot of TV stations in the 50s had singing cowboys. I've always thought there's a book somewhere in the singing cowboys, the local guys around the country. Anyway, Buck was great, and he was a fine singer and a good guitar player and a great yodeler, and he had a wonderful horse named Thunder, and he would come charging onto the screen and he would sing one of his songs and then play a Popeye cartoon or a Roy Rogers clip or a Three Stooges or something. And then on Saturdays, he had a Buckaroo Rodeo on Saturday morning, and I got to go be on the Buckaroo Rodeo when I was about 8 years old. And they had little bucking contests and a peanut gallery, and he was just a much beloved character, and I loved him. And I the whole cowboy thing was I loved Roy Rogers, and the whole thing just appealed to me. The adventure of it, the fun of it, the music. But it was more the fun of it and the jokes and stuff is what I really gravitated towards. So that was kind of an introduction to it for me.
Yeah, and did you start playing music as a kid? Were you playing in bands
I was always
things back then?
I took piano lessons when I was a little kid, and then started playing guitar. I really loved country music. My sister was a big country music fan, and so I was listening to Carl Smith and Johnny Cash and stuff about 56 and 57 and Webb Pierce and that stuff, and it was just the music of we practiced singing harmony together, and that was the jukeboxes were great and they sounded so good, and so I had a lot of background in that. And then when I got a little older, in about 8th or 9th grade, I wanted to play rock and roll. So I bought an electric guitar, the acoustic electric, from the girl down the street for $35. which I wish I still had. It was a pretty good guitar, and started to try and learn how to play. And then I saw the Beatles on TV, and bam, that was it. That was what I wanted to do. So we started rock and roll bands and started playing around Grand Rapids and in high school. But that was mostly rock and roll. And then I went to college. My parents said, you can't be a musician. You have to be a doctor or a lawyer or something because you'll never make it as a musician. So I went to college and kind of gave it up. And as soon as I got out of college, it was like, man, I want to play. So I got a bass and started to learn to play electric bass and wanted to write songs. Got in a country band in Ann Arbor, where I went to school, University of Michigan, and started to write songs. And had a friend who went to Nashville to take some songs in about 1971 or 72. And I said, I'll go with you. And so I went with him down there, and I said, shoot, I can do this. This isn't that hard. So I went home and wrote about 4 songs and came back down a few months later. And in those days, you could just walk up and down Music Row and go into offices and say, I got a tape here. And they'd let you in, and you could play the tape for somebody. It was great. And a couple months later, I went back to Ann Arbor and was playing in a successful country band there, playing electric bass. And I got a call saying, hey, we got a cut on a song, Tammy Wynette cut on your song. I was like, whoa, okay, this is easy. I better move.
What song was that?
It's called The World's Most Broken Heart. And it was an album cut. So
wow.
I moved to Nashville and with a couple of my friends and started trying to be a songwriter, and happened to move in next door to Ranger Doug at that point. So I saw him sit out in his yard playing with his little girls playing catch. He had a Detroit Tigers hat on, and I was like, yeah, because I'm a lifelong Detroit Tigers fan. So I went out and talked to him and I said, do you know who Al Kaline is? He said, yeah, well, number 6. So I said, he's all right. So we started playing bluegrass music together, and he'd been there for a few years, and he had a thing going. He'd done a couple solo albums and stuff, and we became friends. And a few years later, I was working with Dickie Lee, playing electric bass for a country artist named Dickie Lee, who's a songwriter in Nashville, and had a good solo career there for a while. And Ranger Doug called me up and said, my friend Patty Hall has canceled a date. Can't play this beer joint, Frankenstein's. You want to do it, and we'll just play cowboy songs. I said, great. I don't have a hat. He said, well, I've got a hat. I'll bring you a hat. So, and I said, can I play acoustic bass? Because I was trying to learn how to play acoustic bass. And he said, you have to play acoustic bass. That's the sound. So we got our friend Billy Collins to play guitar, and that was the first Riders in the Sky date.
And what was why cowboy songs? Was that
Ranger Doug
talked about, or already was that idea already forming, or what was the
It
deal?
was forming. Ranger Doug really crystallized the idea. He saw the Sons of the Pioneers in the early 70s, I think, and he was he was blown away by the quality of the singing and a lot of the writing. Bob Nolan's writing in particular, that was really poetic and didn't have to do with cheating songs and drinking songs and that kind of thing that he was kind of burned out on, and he wanted to write more poetic songs, some songs about cowboys and sort of in the natural side of that world, and not so much the rodeo kind of saloon kind of side. It was more in the tradition of Bob Nolan and the Sons of the Pioneers. So he really had that vision to do that, and we'd have played bluegrass dates, and he started showing up wearing a cowboy hat, and he would do a solo number, and it would be like, oh Lord, you made the cowboy happy, or one of those Nolan songs, and I was like, where did those songs? Because I know a lot of songs. I was like, where did that song come from? He said, well, it's by this guy Bob Nolan. I said, did he write any more? He said, yeah, about 1,200. So I said, whoa, there's a world here I got to find out about. So I started listening and doing some work, and then Riders in the Sky sort of came out of that. And we wanted to entertain too. We were having fun with it. It was always about entertaining and being funny as well as trying to do the music right. And that's what we're still doing. Try to do the music right and be funny.
Yeah, and you've brought a lot of that comedy into the group, it seems.
Yeah.
With you developed these different characters, Side Meat, the sidekick character. And
Fried Meat's here today, Andy. It's wonderful to be here on your podcast here. Yeah, I'm the sidekick. You got to have a sidekick in the show, Andy. You got to have a guy with a turned-up hat who comes out here and speaks gibberish. That's authentic gibberish right there. For me, it's a vaudeville tradition. I think I was just born a little late for vaudeville, but that always really appealed to me. And the old movies and the entertainment of them. Like Gabby Hayes was my idol, absolutely. And the guys that really kept the plot going. It was like, and when I would first watch Roy Rogers movies, it was like, oh, here's the music. Okay, well, I'll sit through the music, but where's Gabby? So. Later, I realized how great the music was, and it was time to pay attention to that. But early on, I was all about Gabby. But we wanted to entertain. It's a classic sort of tradition. We didn't want to stand there and be like singer-songwriters and tune and turn our back to the audience and stuff. We came out of more of an Opry country music. People are here and they want to have a good time, and you want to engage them and take them on a little ride somewhere. And that's sort of where we came from. And we were inspired by the Smothers Brothers and comedically, and Monty Python and Saturday Night Live and all that stuff seeped in, as well as Hee Haw and real cornball country music kind of comedy as well. Yeah. So, and the original format of the show was an old radio show, like the old Lucky You transcriptions with the Pioneers. I don't know if you've heard those, but that was a lot of the initial stage presentation, like pretending we were doing a radio show. And then when we did a radio show, we did like 250 public radio shows, and which are available now on our website. And it just kind of continued that tradition. It was sort of updated humor, sort of a little hipper, a little more postmodern look at it than those guys would have recognized.
Throughout 2018, Riders in the Sky have been celebrating 40 years together as a band. I asked Slim if there was a moment that it all clicked and he knew that their special brand of cowboy music and comedy was something they could make a career out of.
I always thought that America would pay to see it. I didn't really expect they'd pay for 40 years to see it, which is where we are now. So, but I knew it was entertaining. We entertained ourselves. We were having a great time. So even though it didn't make sense economically at the time, we were all working other jobs and stuff, it was still so much fun that we just kept doing it. And it was sort of infectious, And people started coming to the shows and dressing like we were dressing and sort of getting wise to what we were doing, and it just sort of took off from there.
In 1969, there was a famous conspiracy theory started saying that Paul McCartney of the Beatles was dead. The theory took on a life of its own, and it became a famous urban legend known as Paul is Dead. What does this have to do with cowboy music, Riders in the Sky, and today's guest? Good question.
I was working for the campus newspaper, the Michigan Daily, in Ann Arbor, and I was a sports writer, and then I was an arts writer, and they assigned me to review Abbey Road, which had just come out. So I was pondering that review, and I heard a guy on the radio as I was driving my car in October of 1969, And he said, "What's going on with Paul?" He was calling the DJ and say, "Something's going on with Paul. There's a hand over his head in this album cover, and it looks like a grave on Sgt. Pepper, and in one of the songs that you can hear, 'I buried Paul' at the end of Strawberry Fields." So I talked it over with. It raised the hair on my neck, sort of. It was just sort of a weird time. So I talked it over with my friend Jay Cassidy that night when I was working as a ticket taker at the movie house, and we sort of talked about what if it was true. So I went home to write the review, and I lined up all my Beatle records in a row and just wrote this cockamamie satire of the kind of review that finds all this like stuff that the artist put in, like when you read a review, like this is what the artist meant or something like that, when it has no bearing on it at all. Like reviewers really like to make it something that it's not, when there was plenty to say about what it actually was. So if that makes any sense. So I just wrote all this stupid stuff that making up BS all night long, and walrus was Greek for corpse, and that there was all these, and OPD was officially pronounced dead on his shirt, and endless clues, these clues that Paul had been killed in a car wreck, and the Beatles had released this information to the world through albums and album covers and through songs, both thematically and directly in songs, specifically in songs. So that was the premise of the satire. And we published it on the arts page with the headline, "McCartney Dead, New Evidence Brought to Light," and was the headline, and people took it seriously. It just was astounding. It went viral before there was viral. It was just amazing. It just went around the world. And I was scared. I was 19. I was a kid, I didn't know anything about anything. And I thought it was a joke. And all of a sudden there were all these crying girls calling the nursepaper, "Oh God," and DJs in LA and New York, and everybody wants to talk to me. And I'm like, yow. I didn't plan on any of this, It was a laugh. So, but people bought a lot of Beatle records and played them backwards. And so I always thought that the Beatles ought to send me a fruit basket or something for helping sell a lot of records. And then I went out to L.A. They had a TV show. F. Lee Bailey, who was a big attorney at the time, had a TV show, and he it was set up with a courtroom, and they had Alan Klein there and Peter Asher there and me as testifying. It was ridiculous. So so I had my 15 minutes of fame, which I've managed to stretch into about 17 by now. So.
When I interviewed Riders in the Sky on episode 30, we talked about where they came up with the name for the band. But we didn't get to their great individual stage names: Ranger Doug, Woody Paul, Joey the Cowpolka King, and Too Slim.
I was down in the 120s. The soup was mighty thin in those days. I was working in a galvanizing plant in Nashville, galvanizing with molten zinc and these really strong acids and bases. That was a terrible job. And then I got a job at the library doing puppets and being Cowboy Too Slim. Anyway, so I was really thin. And Too Tall Jones was a Nashville celebrity, a football player that went to play for the Dallas Cowboys and had gone through Nashville at Tennessee State University. And I loved him, and so I thought I'll be Too Slim. And people would say, because I really was slim. I was way slim. And now I've evolved into just right. And Woody was always Woody. He was always Woody Paul. He came to us with that name. His real name's Paul Chrisman, but he was Woody Paul. And Paul Woodrow Chrisman is his real name. And he changed it around to Woody Paul. And Ranger Doug he didn't have a name for a while. And then we called him the big fella when we started writing scripts. And he hated it. He just hated that. And so he just came and said, I want to be Ranger Doug. And like the Lone Ranger, who we all really admired when we were kids. Really loved the Lone Ranger. And so he just named himself the idol of American youth. And Joey came like 10 years later, and we were doing all these polka jokes and polkaholism and all this stuff. And he became the cow polka king, which nobody understands. We don't understand, but we still do it.
Looking back over 40 years, traveling, playing all over the country and the world, I guess. I love asking this question of musicians, but especially someone who's playing in a cowboy comedy band.
Yeah.
Any stories of worst gigs of that 40-year career?
There's some gigs where the audience has forgotten to come. So there are those. There's some where the sound is horrible. They're memorable. The tattoo convention in Portland, Maine stands out as one of the most absurd, because we've played our motto is if they got the dough, we got the show. So we play anywhere. We've played birthday parties, bar mitzvahs. We've played the Carnegie Hall and the Hollywood Bowl and ballparks and stuff. So if that's what we do. So the tattoo convention was fairly brutal. A lot of mostly naked people smoking a lot of marijuana and sitting there not too amused with what we were doing. So that stands out. The Hollywood Bowl with the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra stands out at the other end of the spectrum as one of the real top shows we ever did. That was absolutely the thrill of thrills in that venue with that orchestra behind us. It was amazing. And when winning the Grammys, those are spectacular memories. Just really great. When we were announced for our first Grammy, my daughter Alice was about, she was probably 9. She said, "Daddy, I saw sparks coming out of your ears." I think she did too.
I discovered Riders in the Sky's music when I was a teenager, and I've been listening to them ever since. It's also been a real joy to see my own kids discover the beauty and fun of their music, which especially happened because of the Riders' songs featured in the Toy Story movies.
There was a guy who worked for Pixar who was a fan. And I don't know if he saw us when we played in L.A. at McCabe's Guitar Shop or something. I'm not sure where he had seen us, or maybe from our old TV show. And they were doing the script and the storyboard for Toy Story 2, and they had Woody having an old TV show in the 50s, and they needed a soundtrack for the TV show, a theme song for Woody. So they were like, who can we get to do? They got Randy Newman to write a little song, like a 30-second demo, and they were discussing who to do it. And this guy, I think it was Ash Brannon, said, "I got the guys." And so they went to our website and called up the yodeling, and they said, "Yeah, that's what we want." So they called us up and said, "Will you do it?" And we, of course, said, "No, we're not going to do it." So, of course, we did it and went out to L.A. and recorded it. We talked to Randy and we said, "What do you want us to do with this song, this like 30-second thing?" And he said, because it was just him playing piano. It's this great demo that I still have, and it's in Randy Newman style. And he said, "I've heard your records. You guys know what you're doing, so you just do it how you want to do it." So that's what we did. That's completely our arrangement, and we practiced it for a couple of weeks, and then went out to L.A. and recorded it, and it was in the movie. Just like that. and worked with John Lasseter and all those great creative people at Pixar. It was wonderful.
What's kept you doing this for so long? 40 years together as a band. That's an incredible career. Not many people get to have that, especially working in this kind of an arrangement.
Yeah.
What's kept you going, and is it still fun? And what are your thoughts looking back over 40 years?
I think there's some luck involved as far as our health goes, because we've stayed healthy, which is pretty amazing. But these four people, and yes, it's still fun. And like last night, we had a killer gig last night in Portland with just fabulous audience and great sound. And we hadn't played in a few weeks, so just being back together and playing was just pure joy. Because it's a great band sound, and we all really like it when everybody's on. It is absolutely a joy. And so that's kind of at the heart of it. I think, and we're all still friends. That's the amazing thing. We nearly killed each other in the early days, but we didn't, thank God. So I think we're a little mellower. And we always get separate hotel rooms. So there's always, you got to have your own space on the road. So there is that. And I also think, to be serious, I think there's a little bit of there's kind of a mission aspect to it, of keeping this music alive and keeping this tradition alive. Because when we started, it was gone pretty much. I mean, the Sons of the Pioneers were not. They were appearing here and there, but you couldn't. They were not really on the road, and there's nothing appealing to people of our generation. It was like the older generation, and there wasn't the Chuck Wagon folks were doing, the Bar D guys and the Flying J, and those guys were keeping it alive, but nobody was really taking it to a new generation with sort of a new comedic sensibility, as well as trying to do the music right. And so that's sustained me in some of the hard times. As what we're doing is valuable, and I know it's just a little teeny tiny corner of culture, but it's important. I think it's important. I think it's good music, and it's people respond to it. It feeds something in people, and it's the code of the West, and what that says about a really good part of America is valuable, and I think it deserves to live. And I'm really pleased to be part of keeping that going. So it's not just. It's never been about money for me. It's the mission and the fun and the entertainment and the economy of it sort of followed.
What do you see for the future of Riders in the Sky and of this great old music y'all play?
I don't know. Guys like you coming along, and guys that have the ears and the sensibility to keep it going. I look for other bands that sort of do what we do, younger people, and I hear the Quavy sisters, and they've definitely got it, and I just hope more people come along and see how great it is, And we have been so lucky that we found, because in a band, as you know, it's a lot about chemistry. It's a lot about getting the right people together, and that can stand it day to day and can forge a band sound. Because there's a difference between a band and just. We live in Nashville. There's so many great players in Nashville. It's just nuts. My UPS guy is, a world-class guitar player. It's just crazy. But what I like is a band. I like a band where everybody knows that the tonality is right. It all works together. It all fits together, and that's the energy is there and the charisma is there. That's what I like. So. Hopefully it'll go on. I'm going to be here until I can't do it anymore, so. And we'll see.
That's great. I usually ask my musical guests if they would end with a song. I wonder if you would want to play a tune on your face to close out.
What would you like to hear? Show. How about the theme from Bonanza? Big finish.
That's terrific. Thanks so much for taking the time to visit with me. And
thanks, Andy. Thanks for putting
up
with all my gassing and windbagging here.
All right, folks, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Too Slim for taking the time to visit with me. You can find out more about Too Slim at ridersinthesky.com. I'd like to thank Ear Trumpet Labs for sponsoring today's episode. You can find out more about Ear Trumpet Labs at eartrumpetlabs.com. You can find out more about me and this show at andyhedges.com. If you're enjoying the show and would like to help me keep it going, you could leave a review and a rating on the iTunes store, or you could take the time to tell a friend to give the show a listen. If you'd like to contact me with a question or a comment or a story, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.